The photo sat in David's email like a grenade with the pin already pulled. I wasn't snooping. That's what I told myself then, and it's what I still believe now. His laptop was open on the kitchen counter, dinging with notifications while I packed his lunch for work. 8 years of marriage, and I still packed his lunch every morning. Turkey on wheat, no mayo, extra mustard. I knew his sandwich order better than I knew my own blood type. The email preview read, "She's perfect. Both of them are. Thank you for everything." No subject line. From an address I didn't recognize. But the attachment thumbnail was unmistakable, a hospital bassinet. 2 pink blankets. My finger clicked before my brain caught up. The photo loaded slowly, pixel by agonizing pixel. A hospital room. Fluorescent lights. A woman in the bed, exhausted but beaming, holding one bundled infant while another rested in a bassinet beside her. The man stood next to the bed, one hand on her shoulder, gazing down at the bobbies with an expression I'd never seen on his face before. The man was my husband. The woman was my sister Jenna. I zoomed in on his face, searching desperately for some sign that I was wrong. The slight crook in his nose from a college basketball injury. The small scar above his left eyebrow where he'd fallen off his bike at 12. The way his smile pulled slightly higher on the right side. It was David. Without question. It was Jenna. Without question. The twins had her dark hair and his blue eyes. I printed the photo at the office supply store because I couldn't bear to look at it on a screen any longer. The woman at the counter glanced at the image and then at my face, and something in her expression told me she understood exactly what she was printing. She slid it into an envelope without charging me. I waited at the kitchen table for 3 hours. When David walked through the door at 6:47 p.m., loosening his tie with the casual ease of a man who believed his secrets were safe, I was still sitting there. The envelope sat in front of me like a court summons. "Hey babe," he said, heading for the refrigerator. "Long day. Henderson's writing me about the quarterly projections again." Down, David. Something in my voice must have registered. He turned, water bottle halfway to his lips, and really looked at me for the first time. "What's wrong?" I slid the photo across the table. It spun slightly on the polished wood before stopping directly in front of him. He looked at it for a long time. The refrigerator hummed. The neighbor's dog barked. Somewhere in the house a clock ticked with unbearable precision. "Long?" I asked. "Claire, how long?" He set down the water bottle. His hands were steady, which told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't a moment of panic. This was a moment he'd rehearsed. 3 years, he said. Maybe longer, depending on how you count it. Words didn't make sense. My brain couldn't assemble them into meaning. 3 years, 1,000 mornings of packed lunches, 1,000 evenings of how was your day, 3 wedding anniversaries, 2 Christmases where Jenna sat across the dinner table laughing at Dad's jokes, asking for second helpings of my mashed potatoes. "Jenna," I said. The name tasted like poison. "My sister, my younger sister. She didn't want to hurt you." I laughed. It was an ugly sound, jagged and broken. She didn't want to hurt me, so she had twins with my husband, as a kindness. It's more complicated than that. Then explain it to me, David. Make me understand how my husband and my sister created 2 human beings behind my back, and somehow I'm supposed to believe this was all done with my best interests at heart. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "Want a divorce." 4 words. Delivered with the same flat tone he used to order coffee. No tears, no apology, no plea for understanding, just a statement of preference as if he were choosing between sedan models. "Long have you been planning this?" I asked. "That's not how long, David," his jaw tightened. "We've been discussing it for a while, Jenna and I, figuring out logistics. The Bobbies need stability." Bobbies. He said it like I should understand. Like the word itself was a complete argument. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother. "Have you talked to your sister today? She has exciting news to share with the family." I stared at the screen until the words blurred. "She hasn't told them," I said quietly. "Our parents, she hasn't told them who the father is." David looked at the floor. "She wanted to do it in person, this weekend at dinner, at the family dinner. The one I'd scheduled 3 weeks ago. The one where I'd planned to announce my promotion at work. Jenna was going to hijack it. She was going to sit at our mother's dining room table and present her twins with my husband like a gift." "Get out," I said. "Claire. Get out of my house, David, now." He didn't argue, he didn't fight. He just nodded, grabbed his keys, and walked out the front door like he was running a quick errand. The garage door opened. An engine started. Tires crunched on the driveway, and then silence. I sat at the kitchen table until midnight, staring at the photo. I memorized every detail: the hospital bracelet on Jenna's wrist, the way David's wedding ring glinted in the fluorescent light, the perfect tiny fingers of two infants who shared DNA with both my husband and my sister. At 12:17 a.m., my doorbell rang. I considered not answering, but something pulled me to my feet and carried me to the front door. My mother-in-law stood on the porch. Linda. 63 years old, silver hair, the only person in David's family who'd ever treated me like a daughter instead of an interloper. Her eyes were red-rimmed. Her hands were shaking. "He told me," she said. "He came straight to my house and told me everything." "Don't want to hear." "She didn't tell you, did she?" The question stopped me cold. "Tell me what?" Linda's face crumpled. She reached out and gripped my wrist with surprising strength, her eyes searching mine with something that looked terrifyingly like pity. "Oh, honey," she whispered. "She didn't tell you what she did." Linda guided me to my own couch like I was the guest in my own home. She sat beside me, still gripping my hand, and for a long moment she just stared at the wedding portrait hanging above the fireplace. David and me, 5 years ago, looking at each other like we'd won the lottery. "That girl," Linda finally said. "Your sister, she's been working on David for years." "What does that mean?" Linda took a breath. 4 years ago, Jenna came to see me. She said she was worried about you, said you'd been diagnosed with something, some condition that meant you couldn't have children. She was crying, very convincing. My stomach dropped. "I don't have any condition." "I know that now. But back then, she told me the doctors said you'd never conceive. She asked me not to mention it to you because you were too devastated to talk about it. She said she just wanted me to know so I could be there for David." The room tilted. "Why would she?" "Because she was already working on him," Linda said. "She told him the same story, that you were infertile, that you were hiding it from him because you were ashamed. She had fake medical documents, test results with your name on them. She showed them to him in confidence, like she was betraying your trust out of love for him." I couldn't breathe. For years. Jenna had been planting this poison 4 years ago, before I even suspected anything was wrong in my marriage. "David wanted children desperately," Linda continued. "You know that, and Jenna positioned herself as the solution. She told him she'd be a surrogate, out of sisterly love. She'd carry a baby for you both, so you could have a family without ever knowing the truth about your supposed condition. I never agreed to any surrogacy. David thought he was protecting you. Jenna convinced him you were too fragile to discuss it, too ashamed of your infertility. She said you'd eventually come around once the baby was born, once you saw that this was the only way you could be a mother. The manipulation was so elaborate, so carefully constructed, that I felt physically ill. My sister hadn't just fallen into an affair with my husband. She'd engineered the entire situation. She'd built a false reality around David, isolated him in a fiction where I was broken and she was the solution. Surrogacy was never legal, Linda said. No contracts, no doctors. She told David that keeping it unofficial was the only way to protect you from embarrassment. And somewhere along the way, the surrogacy turned into an affair. It was always going to turn into an affair, I said, the pieces clicking into place with horrible clarity. That was the point. She never planned to give me a baby. She planned to replace me. Linda nodded slowly. I started suspecting something was wrong 2 years ago. Jenna would call me asking about you and David, whether you seemed happy, whether you'd mentioned wanting children. She wasn't asking like a concerned sister. She was asking like someone gathering intelligence. Didn't you tell me? Because I had no proof, just a feeling, and she's your sister. I couldn't destroy your family over a feeling. Linda's voice cracked. I should have told you the moment I suspected. Weight of it all pressed down on my chest. 4 years of calculated deception. 4 years of my sister methodically dismantling my marriage while smiling at me across holiday dinners and asking to borrow my shoes. The twins, I said. They're not just affair bobbies, they were planned. Every step of this was planned. Jenna got what she wanted, Linda said. A husband who believed she was his savior, children with his eyes, and a sister who had no idea what was happening until it was too late. I thought about David at the kitchen table, how calm he'd been. He wasn't calm because he didn't care. He was calm because in his mind, he wasn't leaving me for another woman. He was finally being honest about a situation he'd been manipulated into believing was necessary. It didn't excuse him. He'd still made choices. He'd still lied for years. He'd still fathered children with my sister while sharing my bed. But the architect of this nightmare wasn't David. It was Jenna. "My son is a fool," Linda said quietly. "A weak, foolish man who let himself be led by someone who knew exactly which buttons to push. But your sister is something else entirely. She's been playing this game since she was a teenager. Getting what she wanted by making everyone around her believe they needed her. I thought about our childhood, the toys she'd convinced me to give her, the boyfriends she'd stolen from friends, the way she'd cry during family arguments until our parents sided with her every single time without fail. I'd always thought she was just spoiled. I'd never realized she was practicing. "What do?" I whispered. Linda squeezed my hand. "First, you call a lawyer, the best one you can find. Then you document everything, every text, every email, every conversation." She stood up, her face hardening with resolve. "And then you let me help you." "Help me what?" Linda looked at the wedding portrait one last time. When she turned back to me, her eyes were dry and fierce. "Make sure she doesn't get away with it." My attorney was named Rebecca Okonkwo, and she charged $400 an hour. It was the best money I'd ever spent. We met in her downtown office 3 days after I threw David out. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city skyline, and her desk was so clean it looked like nobody worked there. Rebecca herself was mid-40s, sharp-featured, with the calm intensity of someone who'd seen every variety of human betrayal and had stopped being surprised decades ago. "Your sister committed multiple acts of fraud," Rebecca said, flipping through my notes. "Fabricated medical documents, financial manipulation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and your husband participated in concealing marital assets." "How much did he take?" Rebecca slid a printout across the desk. "In the past 18 months, your joint savings account has been depleted by approximately $147,000. The withdrawals were authorized by David and transferred to an account belonging to Jenna. $147,000, our emergency fund, our vacation savings. The money we'd set aside for a down payment on a bigger house. Gone, moved into my sister's bank account while I was packing sandwiches and kissing my husband goodbye every morning." "There's more," Rebecca said. "He took out a home equity line of credit 6 months ago. $40,000. The payments are current, but the money's gone." "Bought a house," I said, remembering. "Jenna bought a house last year. I helped her pick out paint colors." Memory hit like a punch to the throat. I'd spent a Saturday afternoon with her at the hardware store, comparing swatches of eggshell and cream, debating whether the guest bathroom should be sage or seafoam. She'd hugged me afterward and told me I was the best sister in the world. She'd bought that house with my money. "I want it back," I said. "All of it," Rebecca nodded. "We can file for dissipation of marital assets. The court takes financial misconduct seriously, especially when it involves hiding funds for an extramarital relationship. But I need to warn you, your sister will fight. People like her don't surrender gracefully." First shot came 3 days later. My mother called at 7 in the morning, which meant something was wrong. "Mom never called before 9 unless someone had died," she told us, Mom said. "About the twins, about David, about everything." My heart seized. "Mom, whatever she told you, she said you knew Claire. She said you and David had an arrangement, a surrogacy agreement, and you changed your mind after she was already pregnant. She said you threatened to ruin her if she didn't give you the bobbies." The floor dropped out from under me. "That's not." She was crying so hard she couldn't breathe. "Your sister is terrified of you. She's afraid you're going to do something to the twins. Listen to me. Jenna fabricated medical records. She stole from me. She manipulated David for years." She showed us the text messages. I stopped. "What text messages?" "From you, threatening her, telling her you'd make sure she never saw her children again." "Never sent her any text messages like that. They came from your number, Claire." Rebecca had warned me. "People like her don't surrender gracefully." "She's lying," I said, my voice shaking. "Mom, you've known me my entire life. When have I ever threatened anyone?" There was a pause, a terrible, damning pause. Your father and I think it's best if you don't come to the house for a while. We need time to process all of this. Mom, we'll call you when we're ready. Line went dead. I stood in my kitchen, clutching my phone, staring at the refrigerator where our family Christmas card was still magnetized to the door. Mom and Dad, me and Jenna, smiling in matching sweaters. Last year, before the twins, before any of this, the second shot came at work. I'm a regional manager for a medical supply company. 8 years with the firm, employee of the year twice. I was up for a director position in the spring. My boss, Greg, called me into his office on a Thursday afternoon. He looked uncomfortable, which was unusual. Greg was a former Marine who'd once negotiated $1 million contract during a kidney stone episode. We received an anonymous complaint, he said, about harassment. Someone claims you've been sending threatening messages and making unwanted calls. Filed the complaint. I can't disclose that. It was my sister, Jenna Morrison. Greg's expression flickered. I can't confirm she's trying to destroy my life. She's already turned my parents against me. Now she's coming after my job. I understand this is difficult, Greg said carefully, but the company has protocols. We need to conduct an investigation. You'll be placed on administrative leave until it's resolved. Administrative leave. The words landed like a physical blow. 8 years of early mornings and late nights and missed vacations, all reduced to suspicion because my sister had picked up a phone. I walked out of the building carrying a box of personal items, my coffee mug, my framed certificates, the little succulent plant I'd named Stanley. The security guard held the door for me with a sympathetic expression that made everything worse. That night, Linda showed up at my house with a bottle of wine and a folder full of documents. Been doing some digging, she said, spreading papers across my kitchen table. Jenna's financial history, employment records, a few things that don't add up. I looked at the papers without really seeing them. She's winning, Linda. She's taken everything. My husband, my parents, my job, my money. What's left? Linda poured 2 glasses of wine and pushed one toward me. Your self-respect, she said. Your future and the truth. She tapped the folder. And I'm going to help you fight for all 3. The weeks that followed were the darkest of my life. I stopped answering my phone. I stopped checking email. I let the mail pile up on the front hall table until it cascaded onto the floor in an avalanche of bills and sympathy cards from people who'd heard rumors and didn't know which version to believe. My parents still weren't speaking to me. My father had actually blocked my number, something I discovered when I tried to call him on his birthday, and got the automated message telling me my call couldn't be completed. Jenna had posted photos of the twins on social media. I knew because a former coworker sent me screenshots. The Bobbies were beautiful dark hair, bright eyes, tiny fingers curled around Jenna's thumb. David was in some of the photos, looking proud and attentive and utterly, nauseatingly happy. The caption read, "So grateful for our little miracles. Family means everything." Threw up in the kitchen sink. Linda came over every other day. She brought groceries, cleaned my dishes, and updated me on the investigation she was conducting with the quiet determination of a retired detective, which, as it turned out, she actually was. 22 years with the county sheriff's department before she retired. I found the doctor, she said one evening, settling onto my couch with a manila folder. What doctor? The one whose name appeared on Jenna's fake medical documents. Dr. Allen HSU, Obgyn in Westwood. I called his office and asked about the test results with your name on them. And he's never met you, never treated you, has no record of any Claire Morrison in his patient files. Linda's eyes gleamed. But he does have a record of Jenna Morrison. She was a patient there briefly 3 years ago. She requested copies of blank test result forms for personal records. They gave them to her. Forged the documents herself. Forged the documents herself, Linda confirmed. On forms she obtained under false pretenses. That's fraud, identity theft, and forgery, all felonies. Rebecca was practically vibrating with energy when I brought her the information. This changes everything, she said. We're not just dealing with a nasty divorce anymore. We're dealing with criminal activity. We can subpoena the doctor's records. We can depose Jenna under oath. If she lies in a deposition, that's perjury. Will she go to jail? Rebecca hesitated. That depends on the DA, but we can certainly make her life extremely uncomfortable. And more importantly, we can prove to the court that your husband was defrauded alongside you. That doesn't excuse his infidelity, but it does establish a pattern of manipulation that will matter during asset division. Deposition was scheduled for a Wednesday in late October. Jenna arrived with an attorney who looked like he'd stepped out of a men's fragrance advertisement, too handsome, too polished, too expensive. His suit probably cost more than my car. They sat across the conference table from us. It was the first time I'd seen my sister since the photo. She'd lost the baby weight and looked fantastic, which felt like a personal insult from the universe. "Let's begin," Rebecca said, placing a recorder on the table. "State your name for the record." "Jenna Morrison." "Your relationship to the plaintiff." "She's my sister." Jenna looked at me with an expression of wounded innocence. "Claire, I'm so sorry about all of this. I never wanted it to go this far." "Speak to my client," Rebecca said. "Answer the questions. Did you tell David Morrison that his wife was infertile?" "That's yes or no, Ms. Morrison." Jenna's jaw tightened. "I shared some concerns I had about Claire's health." "You present him with medical documents purporting to show a diagnosis of infertility." "I don't recall the specific." "We have the documents, Ms. Morrison. They have your fingerprints on them." "Did you present forged medical records to your sister's husband?" The attorney leaned forward. "My client isn't required to answer that." "Client will answer, or we'll recess this deposition and reconvene in front of a judge." Something flickered in Jenna's eyes. Not fear, she was too confident for fear. Annoyance, like a chess player realizing her opponent wasn't as weak as she'd assumed. "I was trying to help my sister," Jenna said, her voice soft and reasonable. "Claire was struggling. She wanted a family so badly. I thought if David believed surrogacy was the only option, he'd be more open to it." "That's not what you told David. You told him Claire was infertile and too ashamed to discuss it." "I may have exaggerated." "You forged documents." "I obtained forms." "You impersonated a patient." "Never said I was Claire." "Your actions constitute fraud, forgery, and identity theft." Jenna's composure cracked. A hairline fracture barely visible, but I saw it. Rebecca saw it too. "This is ridiculous," Jenna said. "I gave my sister's husband the family he always wanted. I carried twins for 9 months. I went through 36 hours of labor. And this is the thanks I get." "Were you in a sexual relationship with David Morrison at the time of conception?" "That's private." "You in a sexual relationship with your sister's husband?" "I don't see how that's relevant." "It's relevant because you're claiming altruistic motives while simultaneously admitting to an ongoing affair with a married man. It's relevant because you used that affair to extract over $187,000 in marital assets. It's relevant because you then contacted your sister's employer and falsely accused her of harassment in an attempt to cost her a career she spent 8 years building." Jenna's attorney put a hand on her arm. "We're going to take a brief recess." "Not finished," Rebecca said. 5 minutes, the attorney insisted. They stepped outside. Through the conference room door, I could hear Jenna's voice rising in fury. Linda, who'd been sitting quietly in the corner throughout the deposition, caught my eye and nodded once. A small, fierce gesture of solidarity. When Jenna returned, her eyes were red. She'd been crying, but not from remorse, from rage. The deposition continued for another 2 hours. By the end, Jenna had lied so many times that even her own attorney looked exhausted. Rebecca had caught her in at least 7 direct contradictions, all recorded, all sworn under oath. "She'll settle," Rebecca told me afterward. "She has to. We've got her on fraud, forgery, identity theft, defamation, and dissipation of assets. If this goes to trial, she loses everything." "Will she go to jail?" Rebecca was quiet for a moment. "Probably not. First offense, no prior record. But she'll lose the house, she'll lose the money, and she'll lose her reputation when all of this becomes public record. That's not enough. It's what the law can do. The rest is up to you." That night, I sat alone in my house and thought about what I actually wanted, not what I was entitled to, not what the law could provide. What I wanted in the deepest and most honest part of myself. I wanted my sister to understand what she'd done. I wanted her to feel the weight of it. I wanted her to look at me and know that she hadn't won, and I wanted to be free. The hearing was scheduled for the first week of December. The courthouse was a gray concrete building downtown, the kind of place where hope went to fill out paperwork. I wore a navy blue suit that Linda had helped me pick out, simple and professional, nothing that could be interpreted as flashy or vindictive. David arrived with Jenna. They walked in together, not touching but clearly aligned. A united front against the woman who'd supposedly wronged them both. The sight of them made my stomach clench. My husband and my sister, sitting at the defendant's table like they were the victims in this story. My parents weren't there. I hadn't expected them to be, but Linda was. She sat in the front row of the gallery, directly behind me, close enough that I could hear her breathing. Steady, calm, present. Rebecca presented our case with surgical precision. She introduced the forged documents, the financial records showing the depletion of marital assets, the testimony from Dr. HSU confirming he'd never treated me, the printouts of text messages Jenna had fabricated, analyzed by a forensic expert who testified that they'd been created using a spoofing application, not sent from my actual phone. Then she called Jenna to the stand. "Ms. Morrison," Rebecca began, "you testified in your deposition that you obtained medical forms from Dr. HSU's office under the pretense of needing them for personal records. Is that correct?" "Yes." "You used those forms to create documents suggesting your sister was infertile. I was trying to help. Yes or no, Ms. Morrison?" Jenna's eyes darted to her attorney. "Yes." "You then showed those documents to David Morrison and told him his wife could not have children?" "Yes." "You aware that this was fraudulent?" "I didn't think of it that way." "You didn't think creating fake medical records was fraudulent?" Jenna's composure began to crack. "I was trying to build a family." "Sometimes you have to be creative when you're trying to help people you love." "Creative," Rebecca repeated. "Let's talk about creativity. You also sent text messages from a spoofed number, messages designed to look like they came from your sister, messages in which she allegedly threatened you and your children. Was that creative as well?" "I don't know anything about those messages." "Have the forensic analysis. We have the app purchase records. We have the IP address that traces back to your home computer." Silence. "Ms. Morrison, did you or did you not fabricate threatening text messages and attribute them to your sister?" "I was scared," Jenna said, her voice suddenly small and vulnerable. "Claire was so angry when she found out about the Bobbies. I didn't know what she might do." "My client ever threaten you?" She said terrible things. "She ever threaten you?" she implied. "Did my client ever at any point make a direct threat against you or your children?" Jenna's face tightened. "Not in those exact words." "In any words, because she never threatened you. You manufactured that threat to isolate her from her parents, her employer, and anyone else who might have supported her. You conducted a systematic campaign of character assassination against your own sister." "Objection," Jenna's attorney called out. "Withdrawn," Rebecca said smoothly. "No further questions." David's testimony was even worse. Under cross-examination, he admitted that he'd been aware of the financial transfers. He admitted that he'd lied to me about the home equity line. He admitted that he'd begun his relationship with Jenna while still living in our home and presenting himself as a faithful husband. "Why did you stay?" Rebecca asked. "If you believed your wife was infertile, if you'd already started a new family with her sister, why remain in the marriage?" David looked at me for the first time since entering the courtroom. His eyes were tired and hollow. "I didn't know how to leave," he said quietly. "I didn't want to hurt her, so you lied instead. I thought I was protecting her. You drained her bank accounts. You fathered children with her sister. You allowed her to believe she was infertile based on documents you never verified. That's protection." David had no answer. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s named Judge Alvarez, issued her ruling 3 days later. She awarded me the house free and clear. The dissipated assets were to be repaid from David's future earnings, garnished directly from his paycheck. Jenna was ordered to return the money she'd received, which meant selling the house I'd helped her paint. The court also referred the forgery and fraud evidence to the district attorney's office for potential criminal charges. I walked out of the courthouse into a gray December afternoon. The air was cold and clean. Linda stood beside me, her arm linked through mine. "Are you okay?" she asked. I considered the question. Was I okay? My marriage was over. My sister had tried to destroy me. My parents had chosen her side. I'd lost my job, my savings, and my faith in nearly everyone I'd ever trusted, but I'd won. The court had seen the truth. The evidence had spoken. And somewhere in the process of fighting back, I discovered something I hadn't known I possessed. No, I said honestly, but I will be. I sold the house in March. It was too big for one person, too full of memories that clung to the walls like old wallpaper. The morning I handed the keys to the new owners, a young couple expecting their first child, I felt something loosen in my chest. Linda helped me pack. She worked alongside me in silence, wrapping dishes in newspaper, filling boxes with the careful precision of someone who understood that every object carried weight beyond its physical mass. "You could stay," she said. "In town, I mean, you don't have to leave." "I do," I said. "Everything here reminds me of them, of who I was when I was with them." "Were you?" I stopped packing and really thought about it. Someone who didn't know she was being lied to, someone who confused silence with peace and avoidance with love, someone who packed lunches for a man who was planning to leave her. Linda nodded slowly. "Where will you go?" "I got a job offer. Portland. Medical supply company, bigger than my old one. They don't care about the administrative leave." Rebecca made sure it was cleared from my record. "When do you start?" "April 15th. Linda folded a sweater and placed it in the box. "I'll come visit." "I'd like that." Move to Portland was disorienting and liberating in equal measure. I rented a small apartment in the Pearl District, walking distance to my new office, with big windows that let in the pale Pacific Northwest light. I bought furniture that had no history, hung artwork that I chose for myself, and cooked meals that I ate alone while reading books I'd been meaning to get to for years. I started therapy. A woman named Dr. Patel who specialized in family trauma and didn't let me get away with easy answers. "You keep saying you should have known," she said during our third session. "Known what exactly?" "That my sister was capable of this. That my marriage was falling apart. That I was being manipulated." "How would you have known? What signs did you miss?" I thought about it. Jenna was always competitive, even as kids. If I got an A, she needed an A+. If I made a friend, she needed to be that friend's best friend too, but I thought that was just sibling stuff, normal. David was comfortable. Our marriage wasn't passionate, but it was stable. I thought that was enough. I thought stability was the same thing as love. Is it? I looked out the window at the gray Portland sky. No, it's not. The months passed. Spring turned to summer, summer to autumn. I made friends at work, actual friends, not colleagues I exchanged pleasantries with. I joined a hiking group and discovered I liked being outdoors. I adopted a rescue dog, a scruffy terrier mix named Oliver who snored like a chainsaw and followed me everywhere. Linda visited in September. We sat on my balcony, drinking wine and watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of rose and gold. "David and Jenna are having problems," she said. "I don't want to know." "I think you do." I took a sip of wine. "What kind of problems?" "The kind you'd expect. Jenna's resentful about the money, having to sell the house, the wage garnishment. David's starting to realize that the woman who lied to him for years might not be entirely trustworthy. Shocking revelation, I know. They have the twins, that should be enough. You'd think. But Jenna didn't want twins, Claire. She wanted a weapon. She wanted leverage over David, leverage over our family, leverage over you. Now she's stuck with 2 infants and a man who's depressed and broke and starting to understand exactly how badly he was played. I waited for the satisfaction to arrive. The warm glow of vindication, the righteous pleasure of watching my enemies suffer. It didn't come. "I thought I'd feel differently," I said. "Hearing that, I thought I'd be happy." "Do you feel sad?" "For the twins, mostly. They didn't ask for any of this. They're going to grow up in the middle of a disaster and they won't understand why." Linda was quiet for a moment. Then she reached across the table and took my hand. "That's how I know you're going to be okay," she said. "Because you can feel sad for 2 Bobbies who represent everything that was taken from you. That's not weakness. That's the thing Jenna has never been capable of." "What's that?" "Genuine compassion. The ability to care about someone else's pain even when you're still hurting." Later that night, after Linda had gone to bed, I sat in the dark living room with Oliver snoring in my lap and thought about my sister. I'd spent so many months hating her. The hatred had been a fuel, keeping me moving when everything else felt impossible. But hatred was also a tether, binding me to her as surely as love had ever bound us as children. I didn't want to be tethered anymore. I didn't forgive her. I wasn't sure I ever could. But I could let go of the need for her to suffer. I could release the fantasy of her crawling back to me, weeping, begging for a forgiveness I would never grant. She was who she was. She'd done what she'd done. Nothing I did from this point forward would change that. What mattered now was what I did next. 2 years passed. I built a life in Portland. A real life, with roots and routines and relationships that had nothing to do with the person I'd been in my marriage. I got promoted to regional director. I bought a condo with a view of Mount Hood. I dated nothing serious but enough to remind myself that I was capable of trusting people again. Oliver got fat and happy. Linda visited every few months. We'd become something more than former in-laws. She was family now, chosen rather than assigned, and our bond was stronger for it. My parents had reached out eventually. A tentative email from my mother, 18 months after the court hearing, saying she'd heard some things and wanted to talk. I'd agreed to a phone call during which she'd cried and apologized and told me she should have believed me. I accepted the apology. I didn't pretend it erased the abandonment. Some wounds healed, others scarred over. My relationship with my parents would never be what it was, but it could still be something. I was learning to live with something instead of demanding everything. News about Jenna came through Linda, as most news did. "She's been indicted," Linda said over the phone one Tuesday evening. The DA finally moved on the forgery charges. Apparently there were some other financial irregularities that came up during the investigation, credit card fraud mostly. She's looking at probation, maybe some jail time. How's David handling it? He's not. He filed for custody of the twins last month, claimed Jenna was an unfit mother. She countered with allegations of emotional abuse. It's a mess. I sat with the information for a long time after we hung up. My sister facing criminal charges. My ex-husband fighting for custody of the children he'd conceived through deception. The twins, caught in the middle, collateral damage in a war they hadn't chosen. "What would you do?" I asked Dr. Patel at our next session. "About what?" "Jenna, the trial. If they asked me to testify or to submit a statement." Dr. Patel considered the question. "What do you want to do?" "I don't want to be involved. I don't want to be pulled back into their chaos. So don't. If I don't speak up, if I don't tell what she did to me, am I letting her get away with it? Am I letting her do it to someone else?" Dr. Patel set down her notebook. "Claire, you've spent years rebuilding yourself. You've done the work. You've processed the trauma. You've created a life that has nothing to do with your sister or your ex-husband. The question isn't whether you owe them anything. The question is whether participating in their destruction serves your healing or disrupts it." I thought about the twins. I'd never met them, never seen them except in that single photograph, the one that had detonated my marriage and reshaped my entire existence. They were nearly 3 years old now, walking, talking, developing personalities, innocent of their mother's crimes, innocent of their father's weakness. "Jenna's children deserve a stable parent," I said slowly. "Even if that parent is David, even if I think he's weak and foolish and complicit in what happened to me. The twins didn't ask to be born into this. You think your testimony would help David get custody? I think my testimony would establish a pattern. Jenna didn't just manipulate one person. She's been doing it her whole life. If the court sees that, they might give David a chance to be the father he should have been all along." "That what you want?" I looked out the window. It was raining, a soft Portland drizzle that blurred the city lights into something beautiful and indistinct. "I want to be done," I said. "I want to close this chapter and never open it again. But I also want to be the kind of person who does the right thing even when it's hard, even when it costs me something." In the end, I submitted a written statement to the court. I didn't attend the trial. I didn't watch the news coverage. I wrote down everything, the forged documents, the manipulation, the years of lies, and then I let it go. Linda called me the day the verdict came in. "Probation," she said. 2 years plus restitution. She has to pay back the credit card companies and complete a psychological evaluation. Custody, joint. David got 50-50. The judge said both parents had demonstrated poor judgment, but neither was unfit. They're going to have to learn to co-parent. I exhaled. It wasn't justice, not exactly. Jenna would never fully understand what she'd done, never fully reckon with the damage she'd caused, but she'd faced consequences, real ones. And the twins would have both parents in their lives, which was probably the best outcome available. "That's it then," I said. "It's over. You okay?" I thought about the question. 2 years ago, standing outside the courthouse, I'd told Linda I wasn't okay, but I would be. The words had felt like a prayer then, aspirational rather than descriptive. Now they felt like a simple statement of fact. I'm okay, I said. I really am. That night, I took Oliver for a walk along the river. The city glittered around me, bridges spanning the dark water, lights reflecting in 1,000 scattered patterns. I walked until my legs ached and my lungs burned with cold air. I thought about David. I thought about Jenna. I thought about the twins, my niece and nephew, I supposed, though I'd never met them and probably never would. And I thought about myself. Not the woman I'd been, the one who packed lunches for a man who didn't love her, who trusted a sister who was plotting her destruction, who confused absence of conflict with presence of love, but the woman I'd become, the one who'd survived, the one who'd rebuilt, the one who'd learned to distinguish between forgiveness and release. I hadn't forgiven Jenna. I might never forgive her, but I'd released my grip on the anger, and in doing so, I'd released her grip on me. The river flowed past, dark and endless, carrying everything downstream. I turned toward home. Behind me, the past settled into memory. Ahead of me, the city lights burned bright against the winter sky, promising nothing and offering everything. I kept walking.